Victor Serge was a Belgian-Russian revolutionary, writer, propagandist, and journalist. Originally an anarchist, he joined the Bolshevik Revolution in 1919, working as a rank-and-file member of the Communist Party, and as a journalist for the Third Communist International. His involvement as a witness, participant, and critic of the Soviet Union, along with his willingness to critique and oppose the Communist Party's authoritarianism, resulted in his imprisonment and eventual expulsion from the Soviet Union during Stalin's reign. He was born Viktor Kobalchich in 1890 in Brussels, Belgium, to Russian parents who were exiled due to their political associations with the Land and Liberty Party and the People's Will. They fled from Russia after the assassination of Tsar Alexander II in 1881. Serge's father, an imperial guard, feared reprisal after the Tsar's death. Educated yet very poor, Serge's family instilled in him a lasting impression of intellectual pursuit and revolutionary politics. Living in Brussels as a teenager in the early 1900s, Serge fell in with a group of young revolutionaries inspired by anarchist writers such as Peter Kropotkin. They set themselves to robbing from banks and the rich in both Belgium and France from 1909 to 1912. The group consisted of both pro-violent and non-violent revolutionaries. The violent faction was led by a revolutionary named Jules Bonnot, in which the group eventually was named after, the Bonnot Gang. Serge, at the time committed to non-violence, was primarily working as a propagandist for the French anarchist paper L'Anarchie. The newspaper's office was raided, and Serge was arrested and imprisoned to solitary confinement in 1912 after refusing to cooperate with police. After a string of violent acts committed by the Bonnot Gang that resulted in multiple police and civilian deaths, the group, including Serge, were put on trial in 1913. The violent members of the Bonnot Gang were put to death. Serge was sentenced to 5 years. From 1913 to 1915, Serge served his sentence on a prison island on the Seine. On the outbreak of World War I, Serge predicted the fall of the Russian Empire and the inevitable revolution. It was during this time in prison that Serge became familiar with the Bolsheviks, signifying his turn to communism as a revolutionary means. After his early release in 1915, Serge briefly moved to Spain, but returned to France after Tsar Nicholas II of Russia was deposed in the March of 1917. He was again arrested in France for his political affiliations, missing the October Revolution that brought the communists to power. However, through diplomatic prisoner exchanges, he was able to enter Russia by January 1919, where he joined the Bolsheviks in the defense of St. Petersburg against the White Army. After the communist victory in the Russian Civil War, Serge began working as a journalist, propagandist, and publisher for the Communist International, or Comintern, the internationalist branch of the communist cause. Despite his party status and commitment to the workers' revolution, Serge remained critical of the Soviet Union's authoritarian tendencies during their power consolidation. His anarchism, in his own eyes, was still essential as a principle of liberty and individual thought within the potentiality of a workers' democracy. He criticized the political oppression and inhumanity of the Red Terror and the suppression of the Kronstadt uprising as unjust crimes against the proletariat. By 1923, Serge had joined the left opposition, led by Leon Trotsky. After the death of Lenin, a power struggle between left oppositionists and party bureaucrats led by Joseph Stalin led to the expulsion of Trotsky and the violent consolidation of Stalin's grasp on the Communist Party. Victor Serge is credited as the first member of the Communist Party to consider Stalin as totalitarian. By 1930, Serge was expelled by the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. After his expulsion, he became ill and believed he was on the brink of death. During this time, he wrote and published some of his most important accounts of the early days of the revolution, along with memoirs of his experiences as a revolutionary. By 1933, he was arrested, imprisoned, and sent to the Ural Mountains by the Stalin-led government. After significant pressure from the Comintern, Stalin released Victor Serge in 1936, exiling him out of Russia. Serge was able to obtain entry into Belgium at the time and eventually resettled in France as he published more works. In 1941, he moved from France to Mexico City to live among other left opposition exiles. Victor Serge died of tuberculosis there in 1947. Serge remains a useful and direct witness and critic to the rise of the communist movement of the early 20th century.